Welcome to this video tutorial. Today we're going to take a look at creating this iPad 2 in Adobe Illustrator. We're going to draw it from scratch. It's completely vector. And this is going to be a fairly easy tutorial to follow. We're going to take some time. We're going to draw it from scratch using only Illustrator and a reference image. So that's really all you need to follow this tutorial. Now, our reference image is just an image of the object we're drawing, in this case the iPad 2. The reason we have that image is for a number of reasons, but mainly for sizing, making sure we get our rounded corners rounded to the right roundness, making sure we get our screen size correct, and just, little things. Sizing, essentially, is what it comes down to. But you can take creative liberties as well and go ahead and add things that are not in the image. For instance, this background isn't in the image that I used, and shadow, and things like that. So you can go ahead and kind of have a little bit of fun as well. We're going to go ahead and close this document, and I'm going to go File, New, to create a new document, and the width 1920, height 1080, and hit OK. Now I'm going to hop over to the Adobe Bridge, and I have here a JPEG that I downloaded. I found this reference image on Google Images. I suggest to use Google Images. Everybody uses it, but they have an option to search for large-sized images, and this is a pretty large image. It's 1,000 by 1,000 pixels, so I can zoom in pretty close and get a decent level of detail, so I know exactly what it is that I'm drawing in Illustrator. I can really see the colors in the metallic frame and things like that. So I can have a better shot at duplicating them in vector, because vector we're going to be all over the place, zooming up and down, making it huge, making it tiny, whatever. So it's good to have some detail in your reference image. I'm going to select this here in the bridge, and I'm going to hit File, Place in Illustrator. And there we go. We have just placed it in our brand new document. I'm going to hit Tab to bring up my panels and palettes and everything like that. And what I want to do is just drag this guy over to the right a little bit, because we're going to draw our iPad 2 here on the left. Before we get going, I'm just going to save this, Command or Control S, and I'm going to name this iPad 2 REC, so I know this is the one that I'm recording, and I'm going to hit OK. Great. Wonderful. All right, now that we've done that, basically, go ahead and lock your reference image layer, this layer here with the iPad 2, excuse me. So I'm going to hit the little lock area. There we go. Boom. Now we can't select this and move it or draw all over it or mess it up. Go ahead and create a new layer, and I'm going to double click on this layer. I'm going to set the color to light blue. I like working with light blue guides and edges and things like that. And I'm going to name this Frame plus Screen. This is going to be the iPad frame, meaning the metal frame and the black sort of mat, if you will, leading to the screen, as well as the actual screen. So let's go ahead and get started here. What we want to do is, before we get going, presumably you're not going to have the same exact reference image as I am, so my measurements aren't really going to work with your image. So we need to grab some measurements to make sure that we are creating our iPad the proper size. I'm going to collapse my palettes there, my panels, and I want to grab the measurement tool, and it is located over here underneath the eyedropper tool. Use the eyedropper measure tool. Great. Once we have that, just start here at the left and pull across. I'm holding in the shift key to make sure I've got a perfectly straight line. And just pull it over to the other edge of the iPad, and I can see my info panel. The width is 636.6, so I'd round that up to 637. However, it looks like there's a little bit of edging that I might have caught, so I'm just going to knock off 2 pixels, take off like 1 pixel from each side. So I'm going to write down here, I've got a little pad of paper, I'm just going to write down 635 pixels, so that's my width, and I can close the info panel. I'm going to zoom out a touch, and I'm just going to try to grab a rough height here. So I'm going to start about there, and I'm going to pull this down to about there. It's about, somewhere around there. All right, so I say 823.4. I want it to be an even number, so I'm just going to round it down to 822. So I'm going to write down 822. So now I have my width and height for my iPad. Great. Now that we've done that, we can go ahead and grab the regular rectangle tool. Now, you might be thinking, hey, we need rounded corners. We're going to add rounded corners later. We want to start with the regular rectangle tool, because the regular rectangle tool, believe it or not, when you need to duplicate rounded corners, this is, in my mind, the way to go, because it makes your rounded corners are going to be much more editable. You'll see exactly what I mean in a second. But we want to focus here on our little stroke and fill issue here. We want to select the stroke and just hit the little slash icon to get rid of the stroke. We don't want the stroke. We just want to fill. And I'm actually going to double click on the fill, and we'll go with maybe a light blue or something. I don't know, maybe an orange or yellow or something. Orange, whatever. And we're just going to click once. And right here, we're going to punch in a width of 635, and we're going to punch in a height of 822. Hit OK. Bam. There's our rectangle. Great. We're now ready to go ahead and add rounded corners to this. How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to do it by using a live effect, something that we can go in and edit later on. So I'm going to go Edit, Stylize, Round Corners. And I'm going to set the give it a radius of 40 pixels, and I'm going to hit preview. And 40 pixels actually looks to be pretty good. We're going to hit OK, and let's just drag it on top of our iPad here, zoom in, and compare the edges. I'm going to bring it up. I'm using my move tool, just using the arrow keys to nudge it. And you can see it's a little bit too rounded. We can still see some of the iPad underneath there, so it needs to be less rounded. So how do we edit this? Well, with a rounded rectangle, you couldn't really edit it without a lot of headache and heartache and all kinds of other bad ache. We can very simply edit this because it's a live effect. We're going to go Window, Appearance to bring up the Appearance panel. And when you have effects applied to an object, make sure you have the object selected. We've got our rounded rectangle selected. And you can see here, hey, look at that, rounded corners. Go ahead and click that, and we're going to tick on Preview, and we're going to reduce the radius to about 30. And, ooh, that actually looks really good. So let's just, let me just nudge this over and nudge it up. And that actually looks like it's about perfect. So we're going to stick with 30. And I'm going to close my appearance panel. Great. Now, the problem with live effects is Illustrator, or well, the paths, excuse me, behave as if there's really no rounded corner. You can see the paths are still making a straight 90-degree bam running into each other. We want, for the sake of having good uniform edges for our iPad, we want to make sure that this is a path. We don't want this live effect nonsense. Now that we've nailed down our rounded corners, we're ready to convert this to a real rounded rectangle. And we're going to do that by, well, make sure first and foremost you have the object selected, and then go Object, Expand Appearance. And there we have it. We have just converted our path, so now it follows the rounded rectangle. Awesome. Now that we've done that, we're ready to add some color to this. Well, really levels of brightness, because it's all going to be gray. We're going to create this metallic edge around the iPad first. I'm actually going to save my document. You want to make sure you do that occasionally throughout this so you don't lose everything. I'm going to collapse my colors, get that out of the way. And what we want to do is go ahead and bring in the gradient panel. So that's this guy right here. And I'm just going to drag it out like I just did so we can really see what's going on. Now I'm just going to select the gradient swatch. Bam, we've got a nice little gradient happening. Cool. What I want to do is I want to edit my gradient colors. The gradient handle here to the left, I'm going to double click it, and right now we have just our black channel from black to white. I want to work in HSB, so we're just working with brightness here, and I know that I want 85% brightness. So a light gray but not white. Great, there we go, we've got a light gray. I'm going to double click black here, and again, I'm going to flip over to HSB, and I'm just going to set this to a 50% gray. And hit enter or return, or you can hit tab or whatever, and there you go. We've got a lighter gray going to a darker gray. Wonderful. I want to select this little diamond here on top of the gradient slider, that little position thing. And I just want to change the location to 85%. So what that's going to do is it's going to limit or control the amount of dark gray. So you can see the majority of this is now light gray. Perfect. We just sort of have this burnt edge of dark gray. Now, we want to somehow get this burnt edge of dark gray to all four corners. We're going to do that by converting this to a radial gradient. Now, that's a little intense, so in order to control this, and I'm actually going to drag this guy back into my toolbar area here, if it's going to let me, there we go. And we're going to control this gradient by grabbing the gradient tool. So I'm going to grab the gradient tool, and this form of the gradient tool, I believe, is new to Illustrator CS5, if I recall correctly, was when they introduced this. So if you're using something older, you just have the normal drag or out kind of gradient tool. And if that's the case, you can just start from the center of this rounded rectangle and drag straight right until you get out to about here. All right, just where I just dragged that side. If you're using the same tool as me, just do exactly what I just did. Now that we've done that, we want to drag this top point here up just a little bit to make this a little more oval, actually a little bit more. There we go, just like that. So now what we have is corners that are fairly dark and then fading out to this lighter gray in between those sort of burned corners. Actually, I want to drag this out just a little bit more and a little bit more even. There we go, just like that is perfect. Just burning all four corners. Wonderful. So we're going to go ahead and save this, and we're ready to move on to the next step. In order to get this sort of metallic edged effect, we need to create that contrast between sort of shadows and highlights. And we're going to do that by duplicating this layer about 3 more times to create 4 colors all lined up right next to each other. It sounds complex, it sounds complicated, but that's just because I'm terrible at explaining things. So let's just jump in and do it. What I need to do is select this object, just as I have here, and go Object, Path, Offset Path. And now offsetting path is essentially like the expand or contract selection tool in Photoshop, just it does it with paths. And because it's vector, it doesn't get all funky if you go out a ton of pixels in either direction. So it's really, really cool. I'm going to hit preview here, and you can see that if I offset my path by 25 pixels, it's basically expanding my shape by 25 pixels. It's taking that path, duplicating it first and foremost, and pulling it out. I don't want to do that. I want to contract it. So I'm going to say -2 tab, and that's going to be -2 pixels. I'm going to hit OK, and let's just zoom in and see what we've got. You can see what we have is, well, a second shape that's been contracted. So this is going to be very easy now to just keep pulling the shape in, 1 or 2 pixels at a time until we get to the black part of our screen and create this cool metallic edge. All right, great. Let's zoom out, as I just did there. And we need to now tweak this gradient. So here's what we want to do. We want to select the object, and again, I'm going to drag my gradient box out here so we can see exactly what's going on. Now, this is going to be a strip of highlight, essentially, that runs across or around our iPad. So we want to go ahead and double-click on the leftern or the left handle. I don't know where that came from. And we want to set this to run from 80% brightness. So let's go 80% brightness. Great. I'm going to double-click on this one here, and this one's going to come to 97% brightness, so it's going to be very bright. You can see now we basically have these white tips on the edges. Great, that's awesome. That's exactly what we want. And we're pretty much going to leave it just like this. I'm going to drag this guy out of here and just drop it back into my panel. I'm going to grab the gradient tool, and we will tweak it just a tiny bit. I'm just going to pull the top down a little bit to increase the amount of sort of white we're seeing. Actually, pull the top point back up and just drag the sides in. And again, this new gradient tool is really great for doing these kind of on-the-fly adjustments. If you're using something and you don't have this gradient tool, again, it's just going to be a matter of trial and error, dragging out your rounded rectangle or your radial gradient until you get the correct coloring within your rounded rectangle. All right, so great. So here is our second effect, or our second layer, and what we need to do is offset this path. So I'm going to select this, and we've got the layer that's on top here. If we look in our layers panel, by the way, we have 2 paths. There's our original shape, and here's our next shape on top. You can see we've got a little bit of something going on around it. Great. So I'm going to select this path, and I'm going to go Object, Path, Offset Path again, and we're going to offset this one just once. So we're going to say -1, and we're going to hit OK. Now that we've done this, again, we want to tweak our gradients. So again, I'm going to drag out my gradient box. And what we want to do here is set the left handle to 50%, so pretty dark. And the right handle here, we're going to set to, let's go with about 60%. So slightly lighter, but not much. All right, great. And what we want to do with this guy is, well, let's get our gradient panel out of the way, grab the gradient tool again, and I just want to pull this down so we get a bit of the lighter gray kind of running across the top and the bottom and just fading to a solid gray sort of in the center chunk of our iPad. So the corners just going to have this nice little light gray applied to them. Wonderful. All right, now that we've done that, let's go ahead and save our document and move on to the next step. And what we want to do is, with the shape selected, or select the shape if you've deselected it, again, go Object, Path, Offset Path, and we're going to offset this again, -1 pixels. Hit OK. We're going to bring this in. Now this one we're going to make significantly darker because it's sort of going to be the beginning of this black mat. It's just going to be creating a little edge along the top and along the bottom. We're going to create a gradient that is a very dark gray at the very top and the very bottom, and then just pitch black in the middle. So what's going to happen, if you can imagine, when we then overlay this black, is we're just going to have a very subtle edge up at the top that fades to black, so it matches up with this black mat perfectly, as well, on the top, just as it does on the bottom. And it's just a very subtle effect, but it lends itself very nicely to this, to exactly what we're doing. All right, so we've got this 4th copy of our rounded rectangle that we've created, and again, we're going to drag out our gradient box here, and we want to double click the left handle, and we're going to fill this with just solid black, 0% brightness. There we go. Awesome. And we want the right hand handle to be about 25% brightness. Let's go with that. That's great. You can just see it's a nice dark gray up at the top, fading to black in the center. Awesome, awesome, awesome. I'm going to drag this guy back into this area over here. And what we want to do is grab the gradient tool and just pull this top point down a little bit, because we want it to be pretty much solid gray up at the top and the bottom, fading to black in the center. I'm actually going to pull this out just a little bit and then squish this down a touch more. There we go. Just like that. It should be perfect. Wonderful. Now that we've done that, we want to grab the move tool, the black arrow, and select our shape and go Object, Path, Offset Path, and we're going to offset this -3 pixels. So -3, and hit OK. So we've done a pretty serious jump inward, considering we were just doing a bunch of 1 and 2 pixel offsets before. Now that we've done this, we just want to fill this with solid black. This is the actual screen frame itself. So I'm going to just come up here to my color panel, and with my eyedropper tool, I'm just going to click on this little black swatch. Boom, we filled that with solid black. Great. I can deselect, and you can see we just have a metallic frame ringing itself around our black screen mat, this area around the screen. I'm calling it a mat for lack of a better term. Frame. And I'm going to save my document here. Alright, great. Now that we've done that, we just want to go ahead and grab the rectangle tool, and again, we want to check out our reference photo. So with the rectangle tool, and you can do this a number of ways. You can either go in with the measure tool like we did with the original frame and measure the screen, or you can just grab your rectangle tool and select a color that's pretty visible. Alright, let's go with like a very spring green. Oh, we've got our gradient still. Select the solid color fill here at the bottom of the toolbar to fill our shape with a solid color. And then we're going to zoom way in on this guy. I'm just using Command or Control plus to zoom in. And then with the move tool, I'm just going to drag this guy up so he aligns with the top corner of the screen. And I'm going to pull this corner down, down, down. I'm going to zoom out a little bit so I can see where exactly I'm headed. And I'm just going to pull this guy way down here to the bottom. And right about there should be good. Cool. So there's our screen. And that's the perfect size. Awesome. So what we're going to do is we're going to drag this over to here. Now, this shape that we just created is really just going to serve as a border, and then we're going to use it as the mask for our background image for our iPad. So let's first get this thing aligned, centered up within our frame here. Now, this is pretty cool. What we're going to do is use a neat feature of Illustrator, aligning using a key object. So we're going to select our screen shape here, and then holding in the Shift key, I'm going to select just my last black rounded rectangle. It's the one right on top. So I've got 2 objects selected here, and I want to align these two. You think, all right, well, hop up to the toolbar and center align and vertical align, whatever, or horizontal and vertical alignment. Well, it's not that easy, because if I just hit either one of those, it's going to pull my rounded rectangle out of alignment with all of these chrome frame layers. I don't want that. I want the green layer to move, not the rounded rectangle. So what do? Well, it's pretty simple. We're going to go Window Align to open up the Align panel, and we're going to make sure we keep it open. And you can see there's this Align To option. And one of the options is Align to Key Object. That's what we want. So select Align to Key Object, and you'll see that right as soon as I click that, the green screen rectangle got this sort of thick border around it, not just the regular border. That screen is now the key object. So right now, the rounded rectangle would align to the screen. We don't want that. We want the black screen holder to stay put, and we want the green rectangle to align and center within the rounded rectangle. So I'm just going to click on the rounded rectangle. You can see that then gets the thick blue line. That is now my key object. So now that we've done that, I can just align the vertical center and the horizontal center, and voila, there we go. We have aligned our screen within our iPad quite nicely. I'm going to go ahead and save my document. And at this point, we're ready to add a background. Go ahead and find any image you like. It can be on the internet, any of the number of stock photo websites out there, or wherever. Just something you think would be a cool background. And find that. I have mine here in the Adobe Bridge. It's a photo from iStockPhoto.com. It's just this dramatic leaves image. I thought it was pretty cool. And we're going to do exactly what we did with the iPad. We're just going to go File, Place in Illustrator, and it's going to pop it into our file. Cool. And it's not quite large enough, but don't worry, the image is actually a bit larger than this. It's just kind of scaling down for Illustrator. So I'm going to zoom it up a bit larger, and I'm going to make it a little bit smaller than that, actually. I want to make sure that the width is wider than my screen. Great. Now that we've done that, we want to mask it to that screen shape. So I'm actually going to drop this out, and you know what, actually, I'm going to shut this linked file off, hide that for a second. I actually need to give our screen a border. So what I'm going to do is, to ensure that we don't have any sort of green edges leaching around, I'm going to fill my screen here with black. So it's going to look like it's disappeared for a second. Don't worry, don't freak out. It's nothing that terrible. What we want to do is just give this a very, very dark gray stroke. So I'm going to go stroke, and I'm going to give this a 2-point stroke. And I need to zoom in because I can't see anything. Well, I can't see anything because it's a black stroke. And what I'm going to do up here in color is, and I'm moving off screen here, but I'm just hitting HSB. Oh, it is on HSB already. Reduce the saturation to 0 and set the brightness to, I don't know, let's try 20%. Hit tab, and you can see there's just a very light stroke. And what you want to do is look to the stroke panel here, and you have this align stroke option. We want to align the stroke to the outside. So essentially this stroke is going to wrap around the image that's inside of it. All right, great. I can zoom back out. I'm just going to hit Control 1 to zoom me back out to 100% and zoom out a little tiny bit more than that. All right, now that we have that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this screen, and I'm going to go Edit, Copy. We've copied it. This is going to be our mask. I'm going to turn on that image file again. We can see that's about where it will sit. Great. I'm going to select the linked file layer and actually select the little circle there. I'm going to collapse my stroke panel a little bit. Select that little circle. That's actually going to select the object. Great. I'm going to bring up my transparency panel and just double click on this open area here to the right of our little thumbnail. That's going to give us a mask. The image has gone away, which is a good thing because we're going to basically say, all right, now we just want you to come back here inside of this very faint stroke that we've placed. So selecting the mask, we're going to go Edit, Paste in Front. And Paste in Front is basically a paste in place. So paste in front, it looks like nothing's happened. Remember, black covers, and our object currently is filled with black. We can leave the stroke as filled with, well, actually we should probably make it filled with black because we want that stroke to appear. We don't want the screen to go out there where the stroke is. The stroke's its own thing. It just sort of wraps around. As a matter of fact, we can just get rid of the stroke by hitting this little slash icon. Now, the fill, we just want to make it white. So bring it over to white and check it out. Our image has appeared. Now that we've done that, we can select the thumbnail here to the left to get back to normal editing mode. Now, I just want to give you a quick tip. If you want to move this image around right now, the mask is going to move with the image. So just unlink it and move the image around a little bit until you get exactly what you want. I actually want a little bit more sky. So I'm going to drag the image down a little bit. Great. Now, another important thing is when you're done moving the image, make sure you link the mask back to the layer again. Because if we go and we move this iPad later on and that mask is still unlinked, it's going to look all kinds of crazy because the image is all of a sudden either going to disappear or partially disappear, and we'll have to go and undo a bunch of times to get back to where the iPad was. It's a pain in the neck. So just make sure you link it up again. All right, great. Now that we've done that, we're actually semi-done with the first phase of creating the iPad. I'm going to lock this layer up, and we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to call this OnScreen Stuffs. And again, I'm going to make the color light blue. I prefer working with light blue edges and guides and all that good stuff. Now, on here is where we're going to put the little dock that you see on screen and the little sort of header bar with the time and the battery power and all that good stuff. So let's go ahead and take a look at how we can do that. Now, to keep things easy, remember we still have that screen shape copied to our clipboard. So we're actually going to mask the on-screen stuffs layer to the screen. So that way anything we draw, stuff that's supposed to be on screen, even if we sort of draw something roughly and expand it outside of the screen, it's not going to go outside of the screen because it's going to be masked to the screen. That's going to be helpful for drawing like this little bar across the top. That way we don't have to line up the edges exactly to the edge of the screen. We can just draw it rough and it's just going to sit within the screen area. So let's go ahead, select the on-screen stuffs layer. It is empty, so there's not really anything to select yet, so we just want to select the actual layer. We're going to do that by selecting that little circle in the layers panel. Check out the transparency panel. You can see we have nothing on the layer. So we're going to double click here to the right to add a mask, and we're going to Command or Control F, and it's going to paste in place just that black rectangle. We don't even see anything show up because it's solid black. So we're going to do exactly what we did before. Select the stroke and go ahead and get rid of it. So just hit the little slash icon and then change the black fill to solid white. That way it shows through. You can see there it is. There's our mask. It has just shown up. And now just hit the thumbnail to the left to get back to normal editing mode. Now, in this case, we want to unlink our layer from the layer mask. So just unlink it. That way when we go and start creating stuff and moving it around, we're not going to be moving the mask. If we need to link this back up to the mask later, we'll go ahead and do that. Alright, so let's zoom in here. And we want to start with this header bar up top. So I'm going to grab the rectangle tool, and I'm on the on-screen stuffs layer. Everything else is locked up, so we can't go and mess anything up. And I'm just going to draw out a rectangle that is the proper height. There we go. And you can see nothing shows up. Why? Because we're outside of that mask. Anything outside of our screen doesn't show up. So I'm just going to drag this over onto screen. You can see, there it is. I'm going to go ahead and fill this with black. And I'm going to reduce the opacity. Let's reduce the opacity to about 50. That probably will be about right. Yeah, it looks about right. And I'm just going to basically align it to the top. It can run off screen. Again, remember the mask is just going to keep it on screen. And I'm just going to pull it across the screen like so. And there we go. I'm going to zoom out, make sure it looks all right. And that looks pretty good. If anything, maybe we want to darken up the stroke for the screen. We can go and do that later if it's really bugging us. Let's go ahead and add some text. We're going to start with the word iPad up in the top left corner. I'm going to grab the text tool. I'm actually going to set my fill color to white first. And then we're going to go ahead and grab the text tool. There it is. And I'm just going to type the word iPad, and it filled it with black anyway. So I'm going to select it and just set my color to white, fill color to white. Grab the move tool here, and I'm just going to set this text way up there in the corner. And I may want to just sort of resize the text a little bit. I actually like the size it was. It's about right. Deselect, and it looks about right. I'm using here, I'm going to go window, and I'm moving off screen, but window type character. The hotkey for that is just Command or Control T. Brings up the character panel when you're working with type. I'm using Myriad Pro, regular, and I'm actually going to increase the kerning or the letter spacing here to about 70. Let's set it to 70. That looks about right. And that's it. Let's just move this guy over so it's sort of out of our way for a moment. And what are you telling me? Ah, there we go. Okay, sorry about that. So we've got our text up here. Let's just zoom out and make sure it looks about right. It looks about proper at 100%. It might be a little large. Let's go in and size it down a little bit. So I'm just going to select it, and I'm not going to punch in a manual number. I'm just going to use my move tool and the shift key to constrain proportions, and I'm going to downsize it a bit. And I actually want to reduce the opacity of this text layer to 85%. There we go. Cool, just like that. I'm going to bump it up one little bit and move it. Yeah, actually leave it just like that. Should be good. And you can add other icons to the right of that if you like. We're not going to waste our time with that right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select this text, hold down my Alt or Option key, and just pull out to the right. And now we're ready to punch in some time. So let's just add, oh, I don't know. Let's go with 9. I think I used 9:41 p.m. in my sort of test file. Great. Now, this obviously is aligned to the center of the screen. How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to do just what we did before, and we're going to go ahead and align it to our stroke here, because our stroke is something, or we can align it to the center of our frame. So let's just unlock the frame and screen layer, select the text, hold down Shift, and select that black frame. Oh, that's the image. We want to select the black frame. Don't select the image. So I've got the text selected and just the black frame. And again, we're going to grab our Align panel, and once more, we're going to align to Key Object. We're going to click on the black frame, and we selected the image. Select the black frame, hold down Shift, select the text again, and now set Align to Key Object and click out here to select the sort of black frame as our key object. And then we want to align this guy to the, I believe that's the vertical, horizontal center, I'm sorry, horizontal center. Deselect both, and our time is now aligned to the center. Great. We're going to select the time and just copy over, and I'm just going to double click on this. And this is the battery power indicator. We're going to set this guy to about 82%, whatever, just some random number, and move it over a little bit. We can tweak that in a moment. Now, what we want to do is draw the battery icon. This is actually going to be pretty easy. We're just going to zoom way in here on the corner, and we're going to grab the rectangle tool. I'm going to ditch the Align panel here. We're actually going to bring that back out in a minute to use the Pathfinder feature. But for now, grab the rectangle tool, set your fill color to white, no stroke, and just draw out a nice little rectangle here, like so. And then draw out a little square to sort of be the conductor of the battery. And we're going to select, I'm actually going to just grab the top part of the battery and just downsize and make it a little bit thinner. All right, like so. It's nice and thin. Actually, I want it to be taller. So what I'm going to do to expand both sides at the same rate, hold down my Alt or Option key and pull up and just expand it up, expand it a little bit more. There we go. Something like that. Just pull the bottom up a little bit. There we go. That's about what I want. So there we go, we've got a battery shape, but the problem is that's not how it is on the iPad. On the iPad we have a stroke and then sort of like it's this battery that's being filled with power. So what we need to do is we need to convert this to a stroke. Well, we do that first by merging these two shapes. So with those two shapes selected, we're going to go Window, Pathfinder. And here in the Pathfinder panel, we're going to choose this icon here, the merge option. So there, bam, we have one shape. Very cool. Next, we can close that guy. We're going to choose stroke, and we're going to set the stroke to 1 point. And it's a little funky because, number one, we want the stroke to be white. Actually, a faster way of doing that, let me just undo that. Ignore what I just did. All you need to do is hit Shift-X. It's the hotkey to swap the fill and the stroke. So Shift-X, boom, just like that. Our fill just became our stroke, and we have an outline. Now, what I want is I actually want this stroke to be on the outside of the shape. So here in the stroke panel, I'm going to choose a line stroke, and the icon to the far right, a line stroke to the outside. Very cool. Now that we've done that, let's just bump the battery icon up, get it tucked into the corner, and I'm going to, surprise, surprise, go Object, Path, Offset Path. And let's try offsetting this -2. Let's see if it will preserve enough detail at -2. There we go. Yep, that'll be perfect. We just have a nice square in the center. Hit OK, and then Shift-X again, so we just have a nice little fill, and I'm going to stretch it out a little bit to make it fit perfectly within my battery outline. You can see. Just need to make it a little bit bigger. Just tweak it so you get it perfect. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drain the battery a little bit so we've got a little bit more realism, about 82%. Cool. Now that we have that, we can select both objects. You can try to downsize them a little bit, but just be aware that it can mess things up. Like you might have to tweak the fill there like I just did. I actually kind of like the smaller battery icon a little bit more. There we go. And now with both items selected, I'm going to go Object, Group. Group them together, and then just reduce the opacity to about 85%. Let's actually go 80%. There's a little bit more solid area of white, so we'll be able to stand knocking the opacity down a little bit more. I'm going to grab my 82% battery indicator and drag it over a little bit. And there we go. Cool. I'm going to zoom out. Let's check it out. And that's pretty cool. It might be a little bit large for the iPad, but it's good enough for right now. We're now ready to create the dock for the iPad. So let's just check out the bottom of the iPad here. And the most important part of the dock is nailing sort of the perspective, these angles here we see. So we're going to rely on a reference image for that as well. Let's go up to our OnScreen Stuffs layer, and I'm going to lock up the Frame Plus Screen layer. I think we're just about done with that for now. Let's go ahead and close up the character panel as well. We don't really need to mess with the type anymore. We could spend a little bit more time tweaking it or find the correct font, for example. But we're not going to worry about that. Grab the rectangle tool instead. Just with the fill set to white, we'll tweak all the fill and all that nonsense in a moment. What we want to do is draw out a rectangle that is the proper height. And again, remember, we're not going to see anything because we are not within our mask. So using the Move tool, I'm just going to pull my rectangle down, and then I'm going to pull it out to the edge of the screen. Just like so. Cool, just like that. And now I'm going to drag it across the screen. We're going to set up the angles in just a second. I'll show you how we'll do that. Alright, so we're going to pull this guy all the way across. Just like so. And now I'm going to grab my Direct Selection tool right here. And with the Direct Selection tool, I'm just going to select this anchor point right up here on the top right of my rectangle. And using Shift and my arrow keys, I'm going to nudge that right over until it lines up perfectly. Cool. Again, remember, we're not seeing any fill because we're outside of our mask. Over here to the top left, Shift, nudge over twice, and then once without Shift. And there we go. It looks like we nailed that pretty quickly and easily. All right, go back to the Move tool, select the shape. I'm holding down my Shift key. I'm just going to drag it straight back across. And it doesn't quite line up perfectly with my new iPad. I'm not too concerned, however. What I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom way in on this guy with my Move tool. I'm going to nudge it off the bottom here 1, 2 pixels, 2 points, just like that. And this guy, I need to fill it with a pretty medium gray. Matter of fact, I'm probably just going to sample a dark gray right here off of the existing dock. So I'm going to grab the eyedropper tool, and I have that white dock selected still. And I'm just going to select that gray like so, maybe a little bit darker. Something right about there should be just fine. Let's see what exactly that is. That is, let's get rid of all the saturation and just square it down to 45 for brightness, and that is 727272. Hit OK. There we go. We've got our gray. Now we want to give this a stroke, which is a little bit lighter than that. So I'm going to double click on this, and let's punch in that hexadecimal code 727272, and hit Tab. All right, cool. And we're going to make this maybe maybe 25% brighter. So up the brightness to about 65%. And let's just deselect and see what that looks like. All right, cool. We've got a nice little border now on our dock. What we want to do is select this section of the dock and reduce the opacity to 90. I found like 97% is pretty good. So let's go with 97%. I mean, you can just barely see what's going on behind the dock. So that's what we're going to roll with in this tutorial. But depending on your background image, you might want to tweak it, make it a little less, make it a little more, whatever. Now, there's that issue of the 2-point gap that we dropped in below our dock. We're actually going to fill that with a light gray, very light gray line. So we're going to use the line segment tool or the line tool. And I'm going to set my fill to nothing, which is really a non-issue with the line tool. We're going to set the stroke to just white for now. We're just going to work with solid white. And I'm just going to hold my shift key and pull out a line. And the weight is 1 point. We actually want to increase it to 2 points. And we will move the dock up. So let's just select that and select the line here. There we are. And just nudge it up 1. So there we go. We'll move our dock up in just a second. I'm going to zoom out just a touch so I can grab my line. There it is. Wow. Maybe sure pulled across the screen. Alright, so we're just going to drag this all the way across the screen. And remember, this is on the on-screen stuffs layer, so we don't have to worry about getting exactly to the edge. It's going to be masked. There we go. Very cool. And I'm going to, whoa. And I'm going to, here, move over. There we go. Alright, so zoom out. And what I'm going to do with this line is I'm just going to make it a light gray. I don't even really know what gray I'm shooting for. So I'm going to double click on the stroke here. And let's just go with like maybe an 80% gray. So 80% in the brightness department. Hit OK. That might just be actually a touch too dark. Let's go for 85% brightness. See what that gives us. Hit OK. And perfect. That's actually really cool. I like that. Alright, great. So we basically have created the dock. There is a shine on the dock. So let's go ahead and create that. This is actually going to be pretty easy. It might seem like it's going to be kind of tough, but it is actually going to be fairly easy. So we're going to select the dock itself, and we're going to duplicate it. Command or Control C, and then Command or Control F. Drop it right in place. And you can see, because it's at 97% opacity, those two opacities double up, and we're right back to 100% opacity again. Totally opaque. We can't see through it. What we want to do is get rid of the stroke, first and foremost, and just work with a fill. And this is going to be a gradient. So we can use that hotkey period to give ourselves a gradient fill. And it doesn't look like much of a gradient fill because we're using that crazy dark to darker. We're going to go ahead and actually create a gradient that is white to white. So I'm going to drag my gradient box out here. I'm going to double click on the left handle. I'm going to make that white. Cool. And I'm going to double click on my right handle, and I'm going to make that white as well. Very cool. Now, what we want to do is set the location of our top point again. Let's just bring that back to 50. And what we're more interested with is this handle here on the right. We're going to select that guy. We don't need to double click it. Just select him once. And we're going to set the opacity to 0. And you're going to see, hey, check that out. It's like a radial gradient that goes from foreground color to transparent for those of us that work in Photoshop. And what we want to do is set the location of this point to about 90%. So we just want to pull it in a little bit. All right, just like that. Should be perfect. Very cool. I'm going to set this guy back in with the other panels and things. And what we want to do is now manipulate this gradient using the gradient tool. I'm going to zoom out just a click here and grab the gradient tool. And what I want to do is pull it out this way. Pull it out this way a little bit more. And that's about perfect. And I'm just going to make it more of an oval. It's not going to make too terribly much of a difference, but it's going to be a very subtle difference. And lots of subtle differences add up for one amazing result in the end. So never discount the little things. All right, great. Now that we've done that, we're ready to go ahead and mask this this shape. On the actual iPad, it's sort of like a serpentine effect, sort of like an S-curve, for lack of a better term. And we're going to use the pen tool to do that. Now, if you're not comfortable using the pen tool, don't fret. You can use the rectangle tool and just create a straight reflection across the bottom. But if you really want to go all out, you want to use the pen tool. So we're going to use the pen tool. We're going to deselect. Make sure we haven't selected anything. And we can deselect by going select, deselect. Note the hotkey Shift Control A. That'd be Shift Command A on the Mac. Very useful hotkey here in Adobe Illustrator. Deselect. And we're going to set our foreground color to white. For drawing the shape, we're going to quickly convert it to black for the mask, however. So I'm going to start over here, and I'm just going to pull out a point just straight across. I'm holding my Shift key. I'm just going to pull the point like so. And then I'm going to select right up here about halfway, height-wise, halfway up the dock, right about here. And I'm going to pull this shape over, like so. There we go. So you can see we have sort of this nice S effect, and then I'm just going to click a couple more times to complete my shape. So you can see we just have this kind of neat little shape going across our dock. And if we want to tweak it, which I'm going to, I'm actually going to rotate it up, grab the move tool like I just did, and just tweak it a little bit, rotate it, expand it, whatever. Okay, now that we've got it white, we actually want it to be black, so we're going to fill it with black. Just change that slider to black, or you can hit the little black swatch. Great. Now that we've done that, hit Command or Control X to cut it. Get it out of there. We don't want it to be covering up our dock. We just want it to be masking away part of our shine here on the dock. So I'm going to open up my OnScreen Stuffs layer, and there is our dock layer. The top layer, the topmost layer is that little stroke running across the bottom. So we want this layer here. Just make sure you'll know it's the gradient shine layer by looking over here to the toolbox and seeing that it is a gradient that is filling our object. Go to the transparency panel and double click to add a mask. We actually want to unclip the mask, so deselect clip. And now hit Command or Control F to paste in place. So we're just pasting a black chunk of vector artwork as our mask. Alright, select the thumbnail to the left to get back to normal editing mode. We've got that neat serpentining effect. And all we need to do is, let's try setting the blend mode to something like soft light. See what that looks like. That's actually pretty cool. I like that. You can either use soft light, you can use a different level opacity. You can see our opacity still at 97%. Whatever works best for you. But I like soft light. That looks kind of neat. So there we go. We've created the dock for our iPad. Let's check out what we've got. All right, so far so good. We've got the header and the dock taken care of. Oh, you know what? One thing we want to do, let's zoom in on the dock here. And I forgot to nudge the dock upward. So what we want to do is, let's see, what's that? That's not dock. That's the dock, and then the shine on top of the dock. Select them both and just nudge them up one arrow key click upward. So we see the entire base portion of our dock. Great. Now we're basically done with the on-screen stuff. So you would add icons if you had icons. This isn't a tutorial, however, on making icons for the iPad or iPhone. I have an Illustrator tutorial on creating icons for an iPhone. Maybe I'll do an updated version of it with the iPad and mine iPhone. They're pretty much the same icons. But why not do an updated version of it? So we're going to go ahead and lock this layer anyway and create a new layer, and we're going to call this Outsiders. And hit OK. And this is going to be the camera, the shine, and the home/back button, whatever you call it. We're going to start with the back button. And I'm going to set my foreground color to, or my fill color, excuse me, to white. And I'm going to get rid of the stroke. There's not going to be a stroke for this. So with my fill color set to white, I'm going to grab the ellipse tool and I'm just going to click once. And I'm going to create an ellipse that's 40 pixels by 40 pixels. Hit OK. There it is. Cool. Let's drag it over to our reference image and just to make sure that we are kind of getting the proper size here for our button. I'm going to hit Shift X so I just have a stroke so I can kind of see what exactly it is that I'm doing. And actually, 40 pixels by 40 pixels is actually pretty well perfect. Shift X again. Yeah, that's pretty perfect. So now that we have that, we are going to use our little alignment trick again to get this guy aligned on the black frame. So I'm going to unlock the frame/screen layer. I'm going to select my little button here, and I'm going to hold down Shift and select that black frame. I'm going to go Window, Align, bring up my Align panel, and again, Align to Key Object. I'm going to select the frame out here as my key object, and I'm just going to align. There we go, just like that. Close out the Align panel. You can lock up the frame and screen panel, and then I'm just going to kind of align it between screen and bottom of iPad. I'm going to do that by eye. So there we go, cool. Now that we've done that, what we're going to do is fill this with a black to white gradient. So once again, let's drag the gradient panel out here, and I'm just going to hit the period button, the hotkey, and we want to make this a black to white gradient. So first things first, let's get our opacity back to 100% for that guy, and double click, and just hit the little black swatch. There we go. So we've got black, and this is going to be a linear gradient, just going white straight to black, no radial fanciness. And we're going to set the angle to 90. Actually, yeah, 90 is just going to be perfect. We just want it to be white on the bottom, black on top. Now, what we want to do is set the location of the black point here to 50%. We want to cut that in half, so we can just drag it over, kind of an eyeball it. There we go. Location about 50%. Cool. And what we need to do now is go to the transparency panel and just reduce the opacity of this entire shape to 40%. So there we go. It's just a very subtle little glow we have happening for our back button. Very cool. what we're going to do now is there is more, it's a more harsh cutoff for sort of the lighting effect for this button. So we're going to achieve that effect by masking this. So we're going to go ahead and copy this shape, Command or Control C, great. And again, looking to that transparency panel, we're going to double click and we are going to unclip this. And I'm going to hit Command or Control F to paste my shape in place. And you can see there's a couple things that are happening. The opacity is 40%. That's the actual opacity of our mask. We want that to be 100%. So set that back to 100. There we go. And we're just going to fill this guy with black. So I'm going to look over to the tool panel, and there's the solid swatch here below our fill. So I'm going to hit that. Bam, there we go. We filled it with solid black. I'm just going to drag this guy straight up till the bottom of my circle is about halfway up the actual circle that we just created. And I can deselect, and well, it's a bit too rounded, the effect, so I'm going to hold down my Alt or Option key and drag one of the side anchor points to make this sort of like a big oval. There we go, a much more natural cutoff. Very cool. Just select the little thumbnail here to the left now to get back to normal editing mode. And we've basically created the button. We need to just create that little rounded rectangle that sits inside of it. Here, we will actually use the rounded rectangle tool. So grab the rounded rectangle tool and, well, deselect all. So deselect, select, deselect. And what we want to do is set our fill color to solid white. And we're just doing that because we're actually going to make our stroke solid white. So just flip, fill, and stroke. Great, now that we've done that, just draw out a very small rounded rectangle. If you want, you can draw a larger rounded rectangle, and you can just use your up and down arrow keys to increase or decrease the amount of rounded rectangle-ness. So this is going to be a very small shape, so I'm going to hold down my Shift key, and right about there should be about the right size, and that should be about the proper amount of roundness. That looks about right. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller, so I'm going to zoom in actually. And V to grab my Move tool again, and size that down just a little bit. And we're going to move him over here. Oops. We're going to move this guy right into the middle of our button. And we're going to reduce the opacity of this little shape to about 60%. So let's drop it down to 60. That looks about right. Now we're going to align this to the exact center of our little home button. So select both objects. Hey, we've done this before. Window, align, align to key object, select the button as the key object, and align to both the horizontal and vertical centers. Great, great, great. Awesome. There we go. We've created the back or the home button. And actually, it looks maybe a little bit too large. So I'm going to select the whole thing there. And let me get down to where it is. And just decrease the size just a smidgen. I mean, just a tiny bit. And now we've off-centered our little shape. There we go. Cool. That's good enough for now. Alright, let's move up to the top and throw the camera into place. The camera is actually pretty simple. Basically, we're just going to create a gray rectangle, or not rectangle, excuse me, a gray ellipse, and we might throw a gradient inside of it, or an inner glow or something to that extent to give it sort of a little bit of an impressed look. So we're going to grab the ellipse tool, give it the foreground color of white, and actually I'm going to go to my reference image just to make sure I get it the exact size that it's supposed to be. Details, details, details. There we go. That's a good size. I'm going to move it right back over here. And again, to align it to the center, actually, we can use our already aligned button down here at the bottom of our iPad. Move this transparency panel out of the way. So I'm going to select both of these holding the Shift key. Select both those guys. Window, align. Align to key object. Select the shape down here. And there we go. Align it just like so. Cool. Get rid of the align panel. There we go. We've got it lined up perfectly. And now we're just going to align it by eye between the top of the screen and the very top of the iPad. Cool. All right, now that we've got that, we're just going to use a very dark gradient. So let's start with a black to white, like so. And what I'm going to do is just go black to white, and I'm going to rotate this. I'm going to set the angle to 120. So I've got the black coming in from the very top corner, just fading down to white. I'm going to double click on my white here and make that a pretty dark gray. Say like 30%. Something like that should be good. And then I'm going to use this slider to push the black back a little bit. And I'm actually going to drag the gray over a little bit more. So the black just sort of has a little bit of territory there at the top, just giving a little bit of a shadow. I'm going to select the shape, and I'm going to go Effect, Stylize, Inner Glow. And I'm going to set the mode to normal, set the color to black, and we'll give it a 2-pixel blur. Let's preview that. It looks pretty good. Oh, you know, let's go with 3-pixel blur. There we go. An opacity of 75, 85, 90, whatever. Something like that should be good. Okay. Cool. So we just have a little bit of shape we're giving our camera. Now that we've done that, we're ready to go ahead and apply the shine. The shine's actually going to be pretty easy. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to grab the pen tool, set our fill color to white. Make sure you've deselected everything. If you haven't deselected everything and you go change the fill color, it's going to change the fill color of that object. We don't want that. So set the fill color to white, hit OK. And we're going to start up here to the left of the camera. So I'm going to click my first point there, and then I'm going to drag it right through the bottom right corner of the iPad. So then I'm going to click down about here. There we go. And then I'm going to click to get it right back up to the top and join it right there where we started. Great. Now, what we're going to do with this shine is we're actually going to create a white-to-white gradient, just like we did down there on the dock, but this is going to be a linear white-to-white gradient. So again, let's get everything back to normal in here. Set the location of this guy back to 50, so the little diamond is in the center, and I'm going to set this black handle to be white. Cool. What we're going to do now is set the angle to 90. And we're going to come over here to this guy, and we're going to set his opacity to 0. And that is the white at the bottom. So you can see we're fading now from white at the top to nothing at the bottom. However, that's not good enough for me. I want the shine to really cut off somewhere around halfway up the iPad. So I'm going to drag this guy up a little bit, something like that, right around 40% for that the white slider coming up. If your slider over here on the right is the color that's at the bottom, all you need to do is just drag it down to 60% or whatever looks good. Again, just a lot of it is just what feels right to you. So there we go. That's about right. Now all that's left to do is mask this sucker to the actual iPad frame. So I'm going to drop the transparency panel and the gradient stroke panels right back there into my main panel dock. And I'm going to unlock my frame plus screen layer. And I want to select my main screen, the black screen. I don't want this shine to be on my metallic edge, just on the black part and the screen. So that's this guy right here. So I'm going to select that. Oh, this one right here. Yep, I was right the first time. And I'm going to copy it. So copy. And you can see it's just a black fill, no stroke. All right, I'm just going to close up and lock the frame and screen layer. I'm going to select my shine, and I'm going to go to the transparency panel. I'm going to double click. Now, everything is gone. That's good. You can keep clipping on and just hit Command or Control F to paste in place. Again, nothing's happened because the shape is solid black. Double click on the black, drag it up to make it white, hit OK, and hey, there's our shine. What we want to do now, go ahead and select the thumbnail here to the left. Great. And I'm thinking we want to reduce the opacity, I don't know, something like 50 maybe. Let's just knock it down to 50 and see what that looks like. That's actually, yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I like that. It looks good enough with our reference image. The only thing that doesn't look good is our camera. And the reason it looks so bad is because it's underneath the shine. So let's hop in here to the outsiders layer, and here's our camera. We're just going to select that and drag it and drop it above the shine. And you can see, there we go. We're back to looking like a real iPad camera. And actually, it's a little too big. Let's zoom in on that guy and size him down just a little bit. He's too big. There we go, something like that. And actually, now that we sized it down, we should open up the appearance panel, window appearance, and tweak the inner glow, knock the blur down to about 2, something like that should be good. Hit OK, close up the appearance panel. Ah, I love it. Great. Let's back out a little bit. And there you have it. We have gone ahead and created the iPad. Probably the last thing we can do is just go ahead and create a new layer beneath the frame plus screen layer. All right, right there. And grab the ellipse tool, set your foreground color to black, and just draw out a very, very thin ellipse down here at the bottom, which you can probably hardly see because it's a yellow outline. All right, you can see I just drew a very thin ellipse. All right, just like that. Cool. We're going to go Effect, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and we're going to blur this 5 pixels. Hit OK, and drag this guy up. So it only is just peeking out of the bottom of the iPad, and there you go. We just threw a little shadow beneath our iPad. We can shut off our reference layer, and just like that, we've created an iPad, a completely vector iPad, in Adobe Illustrator from scratch. It took a little while, but hopefully you've learned a few things. Hopefully you have a sweet finished product on hand for yourself that you can go and play with. Hopefully you learned a whole bunch of things about Illustrator, different techniques and things. If you enjoyed this tutorial, go check out the site. That's www.tutvid.com. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/tutvid, as well as go and like the Facebook fan page at facebook.com/tutvidfan. Thanks for sticking around, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll catch you guys later.